How's it going, guys? Welcome to the recap for New York on Monday, the 7th of March. I wasn't trading New York today. As you guys know, it's pretty rare that I do trade New York, but let's have a deep dive into the price action and see what happened today. So hopefully if you've seen the London recap, you'll know that we're coming off this extreme daily demand nested within the weekly demand. We have to be wary of the fact that potentially we may start to see, a bit of a bigger pullback, potentially, getting that daily pullback right. Obviously, we've had a lot of strong bearish momentum. So we jump down to the 4-hour chart, right? We want to see at least sort of a 4-hour chock before we start to anticipate, that 4-hour pullback. At the moment, we're playing within this swing range, so this being the swing high up here, and we haven't yet really had a significant sort of 4-hour pullback just yet. Let's see how much. Okay, so starting to go over sort of 80 pips now. So let me see, so the way this happened is a bit clear on the M15, but we pulled back right to this candle here, then we took the low. Okay, so when we broke this low here, even though it's just a wick break, that gives this as our internal high, right? And then the same candle, after it took the low, it then moved back up all the way in the same candle and then took the high. Okay, so it's a bit hard to see here when you just look at the 4-hour chart now, but on the M15 it was a little clearer, but essentially we had the up move, the down move, took the low, and then we took the high with this one candle. Okay, so we've had a bullish change of character on the 4-hour chart, right? So that can be a pretty decent signal that potentially we're going to have a pullback, a 4-hour pullback. However, there's always the possibility that it was only just to facilitate a move to mitigate this most recent level for our supply, which we are currently rejecting. So heading into tomorrow, it'll be interesting to see whether or not that's the only reason why there was a bullish 4-hour chock, which also happened to be a bullish M15 swing breaker structure to the upside. Did that only occur just to mitigate this 4-hour supply to then continue lower? Or actually, are we now going to have that 4-hour pullback? So maybe we're just getting a bit of a reaction, potentially we'll mitigate something within here, right? And then we'll start to see something like that. So let's take a look at the M15, where we can see that move a lot clearer, right? Where today, towards the end of London, we had that bearish swing break of the bearish breaker structure of the M15 swing low, and then basically heading into to New York Open, we then had a bullish breaker structure breaking the M15 swing high. Okay, so this move pretty much happened between the London lull, so between 10 a.m. and midday GMT, which is typically when I won't usually trade, but we had a bit of discussion around this in the Discord that at the moment, because of the current market conditions, obviously very fundamental news based at the moment, session timing isn't having as big of a factor because there's a lot of volatility essentially around the clock, right? So there's potential moves obviously here to be traded if they make your plan. However, longs within here were heavily counter trend. M15, 4-hour, daily, weekly, all bearish, and there was not a bullish M15 chock until all the way up here. Okay, so any longs within here essentially are against all of that. Okay, it's not saying you can't trade it, it's just to be aware of that's what you're trading against, right? Obviously, if you are going to be that aggressive and do it, it makes sense to do it now, right? Where we have weekly, daily, 4-hour demand, etc. But again, not something I was personally looking at to do. Ideally, really, if you're going to trade against all those time frames, you want to generally wait for at least an M15 change of character. But anyway, by the time kind of New York really happened, we had the M15 break of structure, so the M15 has switched bullish. So now you have to be aware of, are we now going to switch bullish? And then we can wait for the price to pull back, and we can wait for a potential M15 high low to then get that sustained 4-hour pullback. Or is it simply just a trap where the M15 has literally just switched bullish to mitigate 4-hour supply to then continue that move, right? And it just ends up being a liquidity grab. No one knows. I have no idea. That remains to be seen. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when price does reach the 4-hour supply, particularly when it reaches M15 supply within it, this is a good time in which you are ever going to consider trading against the M15 trend. Okay, so let me try and simplify what I was just trying to say there. If you're been following the beginner trade plan, right, and you're so far only be trading pro M15 trend moves, and you're thinking about trying to take that trade plan to that sort of next level, slightly more intermediate level, where you want to potentially trade against the M15 trend, This is the scenario in which to do it because it's pro the 4-hour chart to get short. And it's likely price has just switched bullish to mitigate 4-hour supply. So now when we come into here, right, you can look for M1 entries, or sort of the safer level would be to at least wait for an M15 bearish change of character, which we've now had. So now you've had that, now you have the M15 supply that caused it, etc., etc. So now you can trade against the M15 trend, but this would be a lot higher probability than necessarily jumping into M1 entries within here. Okay, so they're all the different levels of how you can do it, but it's going to be dependent on each person's plan. So yes, there was an M15 supply here. I didn't personally have it marked on because I didn't like the way it formed. There was no sweep of liquidity. It's a straight push. There's no inducement in the leg, right? There's no structural liquidity in here, just a straight movement down. Typically what you want to see is that little bit of a pullback, right? So we know that we have inducement here. And we didn't really build, much liquidity here. Pretty much just came up here with a straight push. So typically when you see that, what happens, get a bit of reaction. Potentially you could trade this, but you want to be aggressive with your management because it's unlikely price is just going to come straight into a clean zone like this and then just fall straight down, right? So typically what you'll see, and this will be a bit clearer on the M1 when we take a look in a minute, you'll see a bit of a pullback, and all that pullback is doing is building liquidity. So then that liquidity gets swept, right? Because there was no liquidity here to take. Now you get that inducement built into the extreme POI, right? Which has inducement, essentially big equals here, right? And this was a sweep zone. So it has everything. It's the extreme, sort of within this 4-hour zone, etc., etc. So from a liquidity standpoint, this is a much higher probability POI, right? So if you were looking at shorts within here, you have to understand that's why it was a lot lower probability to do that. Now we've had the sweep, you can look for M1 entries within here, or you can wait for the M15 chop, right? And then potentially coming into tomorrow or during Asia, if you trade Asia, there may be that movement there. Doesn't mean that has to happen, of course, because the M15 is now bullish. So we can also look for M15 longs, potentially from here to look for that potential move, okay? So we're kind of in the balance at the moment. It remains to be seen whether we are going to sustain bullish, and then we'll get that 4-hour supply fail, and then potentially we will have that deeper 4-hour pullback, or whether the M15 has just switched bullish simply to mitigate this 4-hour supply, and now we're going to continue down. I have no idea, but now we know the options and we can just trade around those. Okay, so I'm just going to mark out this M15 shock here, and then let's open up the M1 at the same time. So yeah, kind of London low, we came in and we had that M15 breaker structure, right? I don't think there was even any M1 entries within here. I knew that met my plan. Kind of, yeah, it's all just up here, and then yes, there was a sweep of liquidity, and then you come into supply, we react, we flip up. There is a flip there, but again, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no M15 shock. Pretty risky in my opinion. Not one that really meets my plan. And then you can see we just basically stayed bullish the entire time. So if you were looking to sell from this M15 supply here, yes, that would be valid. Or even, sorry, this buy to sell candle here. But obviously it's not that well priced. It didn't sweep liquidity. It has no inducement. We have just mitigated daily and weekly demand. And that's why I was saying in the Discord channel, analysis channels, if you are going to look from a zone like that, don't set a risk entry on a zone like that. You're right. You want to wait for at least an M1 confirmation entry, and you also want it to be clean, right? You want to see some nice liquidity get swept, the full entry model, etc., etc. But yeah, that should have easily kept you up from a loss because the M1 just stayed bullish the entire time and then absolutely blasted up through and then switched bullish. So then when we came in to this POI, which I didn't have marked, which I really didn't like, you could have been looking from entries within here, but remember what I was saying? When you get price come up almost like a V-shape like this with a lot of momentum, that initial reaction is usually just a short-term pullback to then build that liquidity that then gets swept, okay? So when you see a movement like this, especially in the M1, you see how clear this is, right? It's like one big movement up and then kind of one movement down. Sometimes they can play out, but generally, I don't like these. There's an example of it, trying to think not too long ago, I'm trying to think when it was, but where essentially you get a big movement up and a big movement down. It's like this, and there might be like multiple POIs within here. It's like, which one do you trade from? And it all looks kind of weird, and the price ends up chopping around in here, and then people can get caught in a lot of losses. And what's a lot higher probability is to wait for this high to get swept, right? Because this high doesn't achieve anything. It's just that M1 pullback. It builds liquidity. Once we get the sweep, boom, now it's high probability to look for M1 entries, okay? So unfortunately there wasn't one. This would have been the one I would have been looking at if I was trading it. So the M1 shock was down here, right? This was the last candle to fail to break the prior candle's high. That's all up one move. We come into demand, we react, and then we push down, but obviously we haven't pulled back since, right? It's sold off pretty aggressively there. But that would have been a pretty clean entry to look for, right? That being the reaction to demand, then you get the chock, and that would have been a flip within here. or you could have been looking at the extreme, right? Because that flip doesn't sweep liquidity. It's just one straight pullback, and then we move down. That's pretty much it. Yes, there's a continuation within here. That's not really one that I think is that clean. There's all of this unmitigated up above it. It's not reacting from any unmitigated M1 demand, and it doesn't sweep any liquidity really. It's just one pullback, like I said, and then it comes into it. So, there's logic behind it following the momentum, but it's not that clean in my opinion. But yeah, I would say it's valid, but I don't really like moves when it's like this, and there's a lot of unmitigated stuff behind. But yeah, when momentum's strong, you can see how potentially you can get away from that. But yeah, hopefully it kind of makes sense of why I wouldn't really be looking for trades within here. Like there was a flip here, comes straight down and in, and then it doesn't sweep right and it gets stopped out straight away. But it's generally because when you see like those super sustained movements up, it's very unlikely you're just going to see this. This is a big move. Generally, you get a bit of a pullback, that initial reaction, just to build the liquidity, right? Then it gets swept out, and then that's when it becomes a lot higher probability to be looking for those shorts. Now, of course, there could have been the possibility, right, where you see a bit of a supply chain start to hold, but yeah, generally, again, it's just to build liquidity. When it's a big impulse up, you get a bit of a correction, then that gets swept, right, because it's early shorts. Essentially, they will get liquidated. And then we get the moves. That's why I tend to kind of stay away from those until you see that clearer liquidation. So yeah, that would be my view of New York. Not the greatest of sessions really. I think the majority of the clean move happened during London where we had the pro trend shorts. And obviously there was a big volatile move for the 10 switch bullish, but there wasn't really anything that meets my plan within here at all. And then once we got the liquidation and sweep, there's nothing here on the M1 really in which you could have got in, but that would have been the cleanest entry if it had a pullback up to this flip, and then arguably this continuation within here, but it's not one I really would have liked. But now we've had that M15 change of character. Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to go too much into a forecast because I can pretty much guarantee a lot is going to change between now and London. So but I would leave it as it remains to be seen. Did we just switch bullish from M15 to mitigate for our supply to then continue lower, or now are we going to get that M15 high low? I'd like to see this 4 hour supply zone fail really to think we're going to start to pull back there on the 4 hour and potentially the daily from then on. So yeah, we're currently pausing at this M15 demand. Not really a zone I love. No inducement, no sweep. It's kind of a bit of a crap flip. I prefer to be looking for longs from down here if you were going to do so. So yeah, that's why I'll be sitting on my hands and waiting until London tomorrow. So with that said, hope you guys had a good trading day, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers guys.